Hi, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you to this webinar about server-side Google Ads conversion tracking for Shopify. Thank you for joining. My name is Nastasia, and before we start, I will give you a short introduction, and then we'll jump in for the most interesting part. So, what will happen today? Of course, we will talk a little bit about benefits of server-side tracking, but most of the time we'll spend on a live demonstration of all necessary steps you need to take for accurate Google Ads conversion tracking for your Shopify store. In the end, yes, this is the most important slide. In the end of this webinar, you will get recording. We will also send you links to the written guides on GA4, Server Google Tag Manager, and Google Ads setup for Shopify. And there, in that links, you will have a space for any additional questions if you have them. And also, during this webinar, you will also ask us questions, and we will send you written common questions and answers right after the webinar. In just a few minutes, I will give a word to Dan, who will walk you through the setup process. If you have any questions, now we know that you know that there is a Q&A feature in Zoom webinar. So if you have any questions during this presentation demonstration, please leave them. And Vlad and Dennis, Ira, Serge will reply to you. Of course, we will have in the end additional Q&A block. I'm almost done with the introduction part. Just a few more words about Stape for those who are new here. And also as a good reminder for those who are already with us. So yeah, as you now know, Stape is a reliable hosting provider for your server Google Tag Manager container and the easiest way for server-side tracking. And in addition to that, we developed and keep on developing a lot of tags, a lot of templates, a lot of plugins, apps, power-ups to boost your data tracking setup. We are young but strong, and basically now thousands of business owners, marketeers, and data tracking experts all over the world use Stape for their server-side tracking setup. And now then, it's time. The scene is yours. I will stop sharing my screen. Please start sharing your, and yes, enjoy.
Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan. Thank you, Nasta, for the introduction. Let me just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen and we'll continue over with the thing. So, intro to server side and Google Ads conversion tracking. Obviously, as already discussed, we're going to go through a live demo of how you approach that. We will start from the very beginning. We will have empty containers. We will do the whole process essentially, right? As few introductory steps, like why you want to consider server-side tracking for Shopify. I believe most of the attendees know this already, but essentially you are overcoming the cookie limitations on Safari, iOS, and what have you from Apple, as well as you're getting resistance to ad blockers, which we'll discuss in more detail during the presentation, and well, blocking of GTMG4 and other tracking scripts by various tracking prevention tools. Essentially, doing Google Ads server side, you invest in the quality of signal that you send to Google Ads, which in turn results in a better performance of your campaigns and better return on your ad spend. How server side tracking works in general, again, I will assume that most of the people here have seen this diagram a lot of the time, but essentially you can see it in front of you. Server-side container is a piece of software that sits in the cloud, receives a request from your web GTM, the good old one that you all know, before sending them to ultimate destination, be it analytics, Google Ads, or any other ads cabinet you may be using. Benefits. Again, we probably talked about it already. More accurate data collection, which is what I just mentioned. You start benefiting from setting up first-party cookies instead of using the third-party ones. You also extend their lifetime. This is especially important with Apple devices. You reduce the impact of ad blockers. Like we said, we're gonna look into how we can get some resistance to the popular prevention tools. control what data each vendor receives. This is basically because server-side Google Tag Manager is a middleware, so you can redact any data before it ends in a destination. This might be relevant for people in Europe where, okay, I'm being asked to be more loud. Is it better now? Can somebody confirm, please? Okay, good.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, sorry about that. So data enrichment, this is not something we're going to touch today, but essentially, again, being a middleware, you potentially can in real time enrich the requests you're sending towards any destination. And then the obvious part is if you're using any secret API keys or anything, you don't want to expose them in your web container so that people can't, steal them or anything. The server one isn't accessible from the browser, so obviously that will be hidden. Google Ads conversion tracking setup for Shopify, which is the reason why we all gather here today. This is essentially our agenda. We're going to set up a server container from scratch. So we're going to create one in GTM and host it on Stape. We're going to install the Stape Shopify app to essentially embed a web container on your shop, as well as provide a data layer, which we will use for conversion tracking. And then we'll set up the tags themselves, show you how you can debug them. And then the last item is we'll talk about custom loader and how it all benefits you and all of that. So with this, we can pretty much switch to a demo, which I'll do in a second. You can still see my screen. So just briefly, so our weapons of choice here, we will have a Shopify store, we will have the server container, we will have a web container, we will have a Stape account, obviously, and then there's our Google Ads. That's the only stuff we need for today. So I'm just going to start from the very scratch. So I'm going to assume you don't have a server container at this point. So we're going to go through the creation of it. So we just create a container on Google Tag Manager. We pick server. We call it something. Naming doesn't, naming is arbitrary. You can use whatever you want. Webinar demo. Let's go ahead and create that. At this point in time, you want to say manually provision tagging server. The reason for this is you want to grab this container configuration string, which we're going to use on Stape in a second. Now, I already have an account, obviously, but if you were to log in for the first time, you will see something like this in front of you. And there's a huge button to create a container. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to name it something again and give it that configuration string that we just copied from GTM. Again, for clarity, this is this thing. And we're going to pick a zone. You want to pick the zone that is closest to you normally. So I'm going to go with US, Iowa, just because I'm used to it. And create a container. We can do with the free plan for now, so we're not going to update or anything. And we're going to skip the adding of billing details, which normally you should do, and go back to the SGTM container. You will see that it's currently verifying. The system is preparing everything for it to work. Meanwhile, we can add a custom subdomain, right? A small side note here: a custom subdomain is something that you wanna have. So we'll ask you normally with the setup, you want to create a DNS record and point it to our servers. The reason for doing that is you want your server container to sit behind the same top level domain as your website. So that match is what assures that your server container can set up first party cookies rather than anything else. So the process looks like that. So let's say we create something like, I don't know, SSD, and I'm going to go Stape Agency because that's the domain of our shop for now. I'm going to hit verify, and pretty much the process on Stape side is complete for this stage. The verification of the domain might take some time. So in order for us to avoid all of that, I'm just going to switch to a container I have created previously. Same situation, has a name, has a zone. You can see that the server, the subdomain that I've pointed to Stape has already verified, like I said, because I've did it in advance. And from here on, we can go to Shopify and prepare our things there. This is obviously a demo shop, so there's nothing going on here. What you want to do is you want to go to apps, open the oh, no, not all recommended apps. 1 second. and we want to go to Shopify App Store and search for Stape. You will find this, which we can just install. Let's confirm. Yes, install. Give it a second. Right. This is a very important step, which a lot of people miss. Like they close this window and don't do this. In order for the application to actually work, you need to activate the widget on the theme side. So that button will lead you here to the theme customization, where we want to make sure that our application is turned on like this. Right, and I don't need to save anything because it's already activated for me. If you have skipped that screen, just in case, the way you do it is you go to your online store themes and you say customize. And in here, you switch this app embeds and you will have the same screen we just talked about. So you want to make sure this is active so that the app actually works. Now, with that being done, we're going to go back to our app to set it all up. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to insert the WebGTM container on our website. So we need the ID and make sure this is the ID of your web container, not the server one. A lot of people confuse those things. So here is, let's close this up. Here's our web container. It's an empty one, like I promised. Here's the ID that you want to grab, GTM and your ID. So we put it here. From here on, if I hit save, the container with a normal native loader will already be added on the website, but that's not good enough for us. So we also go into add the custom domain. That custom domain will be the same thing that we actually added on Stape and that we have verified, right? So I'm gonna just copy it. Apologies here, and put it here. The entire URL like this, no trailing slashes. This is all good. So again, we can hit save because we did this step. Custom loader and cookie keeper. I'm thinking let's get back to those as we had in the agenda after we've completed the ad setup. So we're gonna get back here, discuss the benefits of custom loader and cookie keeper, what it does for you and everything. For now, we can hit save. And the next step for us is to make sure the data layer is enabled. So I have these two checkboxes, add e-commerce data layer events, and I also ticked I'm using checkout extensibility for the thank you page. This is a newly created shop on Shopify, so there's no options for me. So I can only use checkout extensibility, and this is what we're going to demo for you. Now, because of the checkout extensibility functionality that Shopify introduced, which essentially runs in a sandbox, which again, we're going to cover further down this discussion, you also need to make an additional step, which is copy the script entirely and follow this instruction. This instruction essentially is copy this, go to settings, find customer events, and create this. So let me actually delete this and make it a new. So when you go here, if your app is installed, you will see Stape Server GTM, type app connected. That's good. You don't need to do nothing with it. You add a custom pixel on top of it. Again, the naming is arbitrary, so you can do data layer or anything you like. You add that pixel, you copy that script. We paste that script we just copied from an app. We hit save, and then we need to hit connect to make sure that it's actually working. With this, we are done with creating a data layer and embedding a container on our store. So if I were to go to my web container real quick and just test it out by going to our test store, this will be shop at Stape Agency. Right, you will see that this is obviously a demo theme. There's a dummy t-shirt there. And let me close this up, but you can see that the container preview has connected and we have the basic GTM events here, which means that we've successfully embedded our container on site, which is part of the success here. To test the data layer and that the checkboxes we tick there are actually working, we can go to a product page, for instance, and you will find that there's a data layer push, view item, Stape, with all of the product data. Here's my t-shirt, the value currency of it, image URL, and everything, which we're going to use shortly. Just to continue on that, let's do an add to cart and make sure that we have an add to cart push. Same idea. With this in place, we can actually start and set things up across the two containers, right? So I'll be switching back and forth between web and the server, but let's start from the web first. So we have an empty container. There's nothing going on. Our goal here is to set up Google Ads. In order for us to do that, we need to first pass information to the server container, which we're going to use Google Analytics to do that. So step number one, we create this thing, Google tag. We want to trigger it on initialization, give it a name. Again, you may follow different naming conventions. Everybody has their own style. I'm just going to use mine, but again, the naming is arbitrary. This is more for your convenience. So, and we need to give it a tag ID. Actually, let's scratch that. Sorry about that. Let's do some preparations. So we're going to create a few variables that we're going to use widely in all of our tags. So they will be constants. The first one will be our GA4 measurement ID. I'm going to use a dummy one for now, but you will probably use the real one, of course. So let's do something like this. The second variable I want to create in advance, because I'm going to be using it a lot, is our server container URL, which is that subdomain we've created and pointed to a Stape container. So server container URL. And in here, we want to put that subdomain of ours. Again, no trailing slashes, no everything. HTTPS is here, so this is clean. We can save it. Now we have some dependency, and we can actually create that tag that I started. So again, we hit new, we pick Google tag. From here on, we can actually select that variable for G4 measurement ID. And this is much more convenient because we're going to use this variable across multiple tags. So instead of changing it everywhere, we're going to just change it once if needed. So again, let me just give it a name real quick. Big. And let's add a few parameters. So first parameter will be our server container URL, and you can see that Google is already giving you hints on what that might be. I'm gonna populate it. Let's do it like this. I'm gonna populate it with a variable, server container URL. Another thing you want to put here probably is send page view true. This is a basic setup. This will make sure that when configuration tag fires, it also generates a page view event towards your Google Analytics. With this parameter specifically, we told the tag that all of the events that it's sending need to be directed to your subdomain instead of being directed to Google Analytics directly, which is the whole gist behind server-side tracking. So we can save this. A side note, I'm not gonna focus too much on GE4 and its intricacies. We're gonna do a couple of events so that we can use them as conversion, and the focus of this will be on Google Ads, right? If there's any GE4 questions, you can try them in QA. Vlad will take care of them, or we can maybe spend some time on it in a live Q&A at the end of the session. For now, I'm just gonna do some dependencies, do a couple of events, like I said, and show you how Google Ads can be done. So we created a basic configuration and we created a page view. Now we want to create those events that we're going to use. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to do add to cart, and then we're going to do a purchase, which are most of the time are the main conversions you will be using. So let's create a trigger for our add to cart first. I'm going to go into triggers, create a new one, pick custom event, and we want to give it the event name that we see in our data layer. This is add to cart state, lowercase underscores. So I'm going to do the same, add to cart state. I'm gonna call it like this. CE stands for custom event. Again, like I said, there's as many naming conventions as you can imagine, so you can do you can use whatever you want. Add to cart. Now we have a trigger. We can create a tag. We hit a new again. We go Google Analytics. Google Analytics GA4 event. Again, it asks for our measurement ID, which is the reason why we created that variable so that we can reuse it. Measurement ID. Our event name will be add to cart because that's a native event name in GA4. And we're going to give it a trigger. And let's give it a name as well. So I'm going to go G4, add to card. I usually name the tags the same as the events that they send, so you will find that this is matching. Let's save that. Now, we need to give that tag some data, which is essentially value currency in your product information. So let's look at that real quick. In our data layer here, we have this push, which is entirely in GE4 format. So we just need to reference value, currency, and items to successfully report what we need. So let's create a bunch of variables for that. I'm going to hit new, select data layer. Let's find that data layer variable, and just reference it by key. All of our things live inside the e-commerce object, so we're going to use dot notation to reach them. So we will have e-commerce dot value for our value. I'm going to name it the same. DLV stands for data layer variable, if anyone asks. Save that and create a bunch of copies of that referencing different keys. So we also want e-commerce currency, right? Let's be clean with naming, do this. And the last item we care about is items. So we're going to do e-commerce dot items and put the same here. So now we have the basic payload from the data layer, and we can put it into our tag. So let's go G4 add to cart, open event parameters, and add those three. So we have value. Again, G4 will kind of give you hints on the native parameters. You can see these checkboxes here: value, currency, and lastly there's items. So we just gonna put value, currency, and items here. And this concludes the setup of the add to cart GE4 tag pretty much. Now, having done that, let's prepare the server, and then we'll complete with the purchase event and some conversion tracking as well. So to finish GE4 setup to make it server side, you will find that any server container you create in Google Tag Manager will have this in the clients, will have this GE4 client by default. Google is taking care for you, so it's always baked into the container. So what we need right now is only to create a trigger and a tag that will send all of the events received from the web container to your analytics property. So let's go ahead and do that. Start with the trigger. We're going to pick custom, not custom event, because we essentially want all events to be handled by it. We're going to make this clarification here, choose built-in variable. I'm going to pick client name, and we're going to say contains GE4. This is just a layer of protection to kind of make sure that you are not triggering things on other clients. By default, you're only going to have the one, and I assume most of you will use the one, but you might have alternative clients here, such as our data client. There's Snowplow, there's Mixpanel, there's all these proprietary clients. So we made this specification here in the trigger to make sure that we only fire on when client name contains G4, essentially only on incoming G4 hits and nothing else. Next step, we're going to create a tag. Configuration, I'm going to pick Google Analytics and say G4. The measurement ID here, you don't really need to populate it. That's not necessarily. It will be inherited from the event. So all of these settings you can forgo unless you have specific requirements. Your measurement ID, your event names, your payload, and everything will be inherited from the web tags that we do here. So there's zero configuration you need to do here by default. I'm going to call it GE4 base because it's responsible for everything, and give it that client name GE4 trigger. If our goal at this point was only to send page views and add to carts to analytics, we're actually done, and we could test it at that point. Maybe to make a small pause, let me actually show how this is working, how the data is flowing. Before I can do that, in the server container, I need to add a preview URL, which is, again, our subdomain. You already know that. So we're going to add a URL, copy this thing again, put it here, click save. What this does is when we hit a preview button, it will launch preview on that subdomain. You can see it here, SS Stape Agency. Give it a second. It's launching a preview server. This is it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and relaunch the web preview just to show you a few events falling to the server and actually tracking. So there we go. We loaded the page. You can see that on initialization here, where we set it up, the Google configuration has fired. We also have send page view true, which leads to our server container preview receiving that page view event from the web, right? And the GA4 base tag is firing, and it's passing the page view event all of the payload that you sent from the web. So like I said, 0 settings on the GA4 tag. Everything is inherited from the client. We generated a hit here. It reached our server container. The tag has fired here and delivered that to Google Analytics, which you can see here. This is an outgoing request to googleanalytics.com, gcollect. There's our mock measurement ID that I've put there. Okay, with that out of the way, let's prepare ourselves for the Google Ads, right? We are doing Google Ads fully server-side, and we're doing them off of the GA4 signal. So nothing Google Ads need to be done on the web container. Eventually, we're going to add a purchase tag here, but that will follow. So things you need to do on the server container to run Google Ads. Number one, let's create a trigger. And we want that to be a page view. Reason for this is because we are going, again, I'm going to make this specification here that we only want it on GA4 client. This is just like best practice, and you may ignore this if your only existing client is GA4. So I'm going to call it GA4 page view. Reason I'm creating this tag is I want to introduce conversion linker, which for those who are not aware, that's a tag that actually sets a cookie with your click ID and when you land. So we want to fire it on all pages to make sure we're not missing a landing with a click ID. So we pick the conversion linker, we trigger it on GA4 page views. There's nothing you need to do here again, unless in very advanced cases. So I'm not gonna cover that today. So you just name it conversion linker as is. You hit save, you're good to go. Now, any page view that comes in with a click ID will be handled by this. The click ID will be set in the cookie, which again, once we start debugging this shortly, I'll show you all of that. Now let's create a trigger for our add to cart. Again, we want to create a new trigger, pick a custom event. The event name is the same as we've put in our GA4 tag here, right? So we're sending an event name of add to cart, lowercase with underscores. This is exactly what we're going to use in our trigger, like this. And then again, I'm going to make this to make sure that we only fire it on GA4 events. Let's call it GA4 add to cart. Save. We have our trigger. We can create a conversion tag finally. So we hit new, we pick Google Ads conversion tracking. We give it our add to cart trigger, and we're almost there. I'm gonna call it ads, add to cart. And in here, what we need to do, let's tick this checkbox, and we need to give it conversion ID and conversion label. So with this, I'm gonna switch to Google Ads, have a dummy account here, and let's create new conversion actions that we're going to report to. So I'm going to pick website, give it our demo shop. I'm going to cancel these suggestions. I don't care about that. Turn on enhanced conversions. If you don't have it already, this will pop up. And I want to add conversions manually. I'm going to select the category. We're going to do add to cart. Let's have it primary. That's okay. Let's call it something. We'll call it like this. Doesn't matter, it's my local currency, different values, all right. Again, I'm not touching your attribution settings or anything. I'm gonna leave everything as default. Enhanced conversions we're gonna get back to in a second. And this is done, we've created add to cart. Let's go ahead and actually create a purchase right away because we're gonna use that. So I'm gonna go STTM purchase. Again, we want to use the dynamic value because it's going to be dynamic and not touching any attribution settings. You may play with that if you want to. Agree and continue. Once we've agreed and continued, we want to switch to this tag, use Google Tag Manager, which is going to give us the conversion ID and conversion labels, which is exactly what we're looking for. So I'm going to copy this conversion ID. And again, I want to be, let's put temporaries here. I want to be smart and clean about it. So I'm going to actually create a variable. Sorry, stale data. This happens. Right. So I'm going to create a variable first to hold our conversion ID, because it's going to be used in multiple tags. Potentially, you're going to have like more conversions, and this data point will not change. So again, I'm going to create a constant, going to call it ads conversion ID. Right? Going to go back to tags. Let's create that conversion tag again. Tick this box, give it our trigger. We now have the conversion ID in the variables, so I'm going to use that. And for the label, we go back to ads and copy our add to cart tag. This will be our conversion label, right? Let's call it, give it a name, and hit save. So with this, we've created GE4 flow and everything. We're sending events to our server, and we've created a GE4 Google Ads conversion. So let's just go ahead and test it real quick before we switch to purchase, which is a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to close my preview sessions because we made some changes. Let's launch them anew. Again, server preview, empty. And in here, let's launch the web preview again and go to our website. Let's go to the product page and actually add something to cart. When we edit, we have our data layer push like we discussed before. On that data layer push, we fired a GE4 event, which holds our value, currency, and the items array with all of the goodness. We can look at it reaching our server container. Here's our add to cart incoming. You will find that in the event data, we have that items array because we've sent that. We obviously have value, and we obviously have currency somewhere here. Here it is, currency USD. So, and since we've set it all up, here's our tag firing on add to cart event. You can see that it's successfully fired. And if you look at the values, here's our conversion ID, and here's our conversion label. Essentially, it has fired. It is delivering Google Ads conversion to your ads account. It's hard to see here because like let me save this for a sec. Because the validation on Google Ads happens within 3 hours, so the newly created conversion action, if I show it to you right now, would still be as inactive, but a couple hours after you send the first hit, it will become activated, and there you go. We just did an add to cart. So I'm thinking let's go and do purchase. For the purchase event, let's first of all, let's go ahead and actually reach the thank you page so that we can see what's happening there. Let's go to checkout. And here comes the interesting part. Just give it a second to load and I'll walk you through that. Not sure why it's stuck on me. Oh. Well, this was supposed to happen on a webinar, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be proper. So let's try again.
Just take your time to drink some water. Yes, and everything
Yeah,
will
right. I mean, I'm thinking we're
Yeah.
kind of have a lot of things to cover yet, so I just want to make sure we make it all happen. Again, let's try and go to checkout. Let's maybe reduce this to 1 for good luck. And this does not want to load again. Interesting. Shopify, what you doing? Okay, let's try it live. Let's try it without the preview. Still have my cart. Let's go to checkout. Oh, and it loads now. Okay. So what you may see here is we were on a page we were on a product page, then we went on a cart page, but once we reached the checkout, you can see that the preview is no longer connecting, right? Otherwise, we would see a checkout page here, but you see this is crossed out. The preview is not connecting to this page. and nothing is going on. The reason for this is checkout extensibility, as we discussed, right? If we go back to our shop here and go through the settings and look at the checkout, we will find that the order status page additional scripts are depreciated because we're using checkout extensibility. The way checkout extensibility works is that you are not allowed to add code directly to this page or the thank you page for that matter. And everything that is going on happens inside a sandbox. So essentially a hidden iframe, which you can find in the console here. But then again, don't get too scared. I'm gonna cover more ground on this. Let's just find that first. It's going to be a web pixel sandbox something. And that place is where our data layer and everything and our GTM is running. So to repeat myself, because of the checkout extensibility, we are not able to add any code directly to checkout or thank you pages. When I say code, that includes data layer pushes, that includes the GTM container itself. That's why it's a little bit complicated to debug it, but we're going to show you how. Also, just to connect the dots, these customer events pixel that we created with you, and then we copied the script from the app, is what helps us do it, right? Because these scripts, these custom pixels, they run in that sandbox. You can see it here. Pixel access is sandboxed, right? It's not on the parent page. It's like buried deeper down. And that's the particular reason why we can't connect to the preview, although the GTM container is essentially here as we can figure out from the console. So knowing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a purchase event here, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to debug it all, right? So for the simplicity of it, let's create the trigger first. You can probably guess how the purchase event is named. So that will be purchase state. Again, if anyone is curious, the reason we add those suffixes there is not for like branding purposes or anything. We just want to make sure that there's no conflicts with existing data layers, existing triggers that people have, and we thought like adding our brand name there will probably make it a unique event. So there's never an overlap. You're never going to fire like tags where you're not supposed to or something like that. Because we're dealing with the new store right now, but a lot of you, I imagine, will be dealing with the existing stores, so you don't want to mess up what's already going on there. So we created this trigger, which is purchase state. We're going to go ahead and just copy our add to cart, because essentially all the events in GA4 have the same model. So I'm going to call it purchase. I'm going to give it an event named purchase. We have the same value, same currency, same items. They sit in the same place, so we don't need to change anything. We're going to just change the trigger to purchase. Hit save. We now have our purchase tag. Now, as we discussed, right, we cannot connect in preview to the checkout pages. So the only way we can then see all of this actually working is by the server container receiving those events. In order for that to happen, we need to publish our container because, again, in that sandbox, we cannot connect with the preview environment. So in that sandbox, only a live container will be running. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this. Let's say webinar, I guess. So the reason I'm doing that is now that container is published and that published container has those events and everything. When we go to a checkout page like this here, let's refresh that. It will actually execute in that sandbox. That's why I have console open, and we're going to do some manipulations there. Meanwhile, let me just finish the purchase. So let me put something here. Wilmington, give it a zip code. And this is a test payment, of course. So there's no credit card to put there. Let's do something. Then Stape should work. This is all there. Okay, pay now. We are now on the thank you page. This is where our purchase event would have fired. Again, on the parent page, no GTM, no data layer, no nothing. We can go to console and in here, find our web pixel, sandbox, type data layer, just to really just to quickly check ourselves and to make sure things are happening here. And you will find that the purchase Stape event right here has fired. So data layer is in place. We have validated that. Our live container, which we just published, should have fired a purchase event off of this push and deliver it to the server. So let's look, apologies. Let's look at it here. Here's our purchase event incoming, right? So everything worked. We received our purchase event on the server. However, we are not able to, from the website, we are not able to debug it normally like every one of you is probably used to, right? So again, just to kind of nail that concept, when I go to the normal pages, like this, right? The parent pages where we can put the code, the preview connects, and we see events, and everything is okay. We can trigger our view items and such. You will find it here. The moment we go to checkout, set this to cart. The moment we go to checkout, and this loads right now beautifully, you see that the preview is not connecting because the preview cannot find GTM on the parent page. It's buried down in the sandbox. I apologize, I'm going to be repeating that word a lot, but that's something you need to understand. So the only way to actually, there's two ways to debug those events that are in the sandbox. One is like I showed you in the console. So you can find that sandbox. It will be called web pixel sandbox and then a bunch of random numbers. You can type things like data layer here to see that the data layer is, is actually there, that the pushes occur. You could also look at the network and just look at the events that are happening. This is our actual GE4 head going to our server container, but that's needlessly complicated. So we can just publish the container, open the server preview, and wait for that event to actually land here. Right. Okay. Now I need a drink. Just give me a second. Okay. Pretty much the last part we need to cover here before we go to custom loaders and all of that goodness is, well, create an actual conversion here. So let's create a trigger. Let's copy our add to cart because we're lazy, don't want to do extra work. So we're going to say purchase. Let's call it G4 purchase and save that. Let's go to tags. Again, we're lazy, so we're just going to copy the add to cart. Let's do purchase. Okay, let's change the trigger to a purchase. Our conversion ID remains the same, right? Hence using the variable. We need to replace the label. And we find it here back when we created our conversion in Google Ads. So I'm going to copy the label of a purchase, dump it here. Value and currency, you don't need to explicitly put them here. They will be inherited from the event data. You can read about this under these hovers. There used to be a checkbox for sending the user data. It's no longer here, so we don't need to care about it. And I'm going to show to you in a second how you make sure user data is also passed. So for Google Ads purchase tag, we are done. We've given it the correct label. We've using the same ID. We gave it the proper trigger, which is a purchase event. We said that the product level data will be grabbed from the incoming event. So again, you don't need to give it items or anything. This will be auto collected. Let's hit save with that. Now, let's switch to Google Ads for a second, right? Because this is a new dummy account, we need to, we've enabled enhanced conversions when creating this. We just want to make sure, no, they're not here, right? Sorry. We want to go to settings and look at enhanced conversions. They are turned on, and instead of Google Tag, we want to say Google Tag Manager because that's what we're going to use. Hit save. We're done with the setup Google Ads site pretty much. Let's look at our goals. Like I told you before, they are inactive because, well, it needs to be at least 3 hours before they receive a first hit for them to actually show as activated and everything. Right. So enhanced conversions are activated Google site. We have the tags ready in our server container. The only thing we need to do is with the purchase event, actually pass that user data, right? Let's look at the data layer structure of add to cart. Let's use that as a blueprint. Every event pushed by Stape on Shopify will have this object user data. These are nulls right now because I'm not logged in. I'm on an add to cart stage, so this is empty. If we go back to the purchase that we did and just look here real quick, you will find that on a purchase event, that user data is populated with my inputs. It's then Stape, there's my email, region, zip, everything. So to make it quick, on the web container, let's create another data layer variable to grab my email, which I'm just going to do email, for example, because I want to save everyone some time. So we do user data dot email address, I think. Let me check myself. No, it's actually just email. Okay. So user data email, and let's rename this and do user data email and hit save. And again, this is happening because I'm on different accounts in Google Ads and in GTM. Apologies for this. Let me refresh. And we haven't created it. So let's do it again real quick. So we want to say user data dot email, call it accordingly, hit save. Now we go to GA4 purchase event and we tick this checkbox, include user provided data from your website. GA4 digests user data in a specific variable. So before we do that, let's untick it. Sorry, let's create that variable. So we go to variables, we hit new, and we find what's called user provided data, right? Let's call it exactly the same. Let's say GE4, sorry, GE4 user provided data. Manual configuration, and let's pick up email. Our email is userdata.email. You can create a bunch of other variables. All of that is at the data layer and populate these drop downs with those variables. I'm just going to do email for demonstration. You follow the same process for other stuff. So we're going to hit save. And we're going to go to our purchase event. Tick that box, include user provided data from your website. And now we can select that variable, which we just created. We hit save. Your implementation is done. We can publish the container. Say purchase done. Okay. You can publish the container and we're pretty much done. So we did Google Ads add to cart conversion. We did Google Ads purchase conversion. We discussed how you can validate it. If you we can do it maybe once again, do another purchase. But essentially, like I said, because of the sandbox environment, you can't connect to the web preview on the thank you page and everything. The way you debug is you listen for those events with the server and and make sure they actually fall here. That's pretty much it on the Google Ads side. But when you send the few first hits, these conversion actions of yours will switch from inactive to no recent conversions. And essentially, eventually, once it attributes at least one, it was going to say active, and it's going to show you some stats here, such as last signal received, last conversion attributed, stuff like that. I think at this point, following our agenda, I can switch to custom loader power-ups and all of that goodness. This is fairly easy, especially on Shopify. So what we're going to do, I'm going to get back to our app. So let's go apps, Stape. Give it a second to load. And right, so we're interested in this, add custom loader, and this cookie keeper. Now, before we hit save, we need an input here, and we need to do a few things on Stape side. So I'm going to go back to my account here. I want to grab the container identifier, which is this. Just copy it and put it in this box. This is Stape container identifier. This part will replace GTM.js in your snippet, essentially masking it from ad blockers and things. So that's done. Let's go back here, go to power-ups, and let's actually enable this custom loader, save changes. ID, well, this is a dummy ID. We don't care. The idea is with Shopify, if you select the Shopify, everything is done by the app. So this is just more for your information. What we want to do is we want to go and enable this cookie keeper. I'm going to enable it right now, and then I'm going to tell you all what that does. I'm going to pick all the cookies that we have available here. So this, and that, and I'm going to save changes. You will see that container is redeploying Stape side, so it will take a couple of seconds before all of these changes actually apply. But meanwhile, we can switch to here. We've put our container identifier. We've selected the cookie keeper. We can hit save. Now, to speak about those power-ups for a second. Custom loader is a thing that prevents you from being blocked by ad blockers. Real quick, if you look at the native loader, which can be found here, if you look at the snippet, you will find that your container is downloaded from googletagmanager.com. The file is gtm.js, and then there's the ID of the container, which also kind of contains GTM in the lettering. What happens with the custom loader, let me show it to you here, I guess. Let's grab the same ID. You don't need to do it. Like I said, this is handled for you by the application on Shopify, but just to give you an idea of what's happening under the hood, let's just ignore all this, generate. If you look at this snippet, you will find that instead of googletagmanager.com, we have our subdomain, which we've created. So the container will be downloaded from that subdomain. So any blocking attempt will not recognize anything Google here. Next point is instead of gtm.js, we have this container identifier.js, which is, again, to an outside observer, this is gibberish. We also replace the ID with st just to mask it a little bit. And you will find that the GTM ID no longer has this prefix. Again, doing some masking from ad blockers and such. So pretty much making sure that you have resistance to ad blockers, to tracking prevention. And you have done it all simply by doing these checkboxes on a Shopify app. So if we look, for instance, at the shop itself, and let's say we go to network, and let's say we try to look for GTM. You will not find, like, this is not GTM, this is your Google Analytics hit. So you will not find Google Tag Manager being downloaded here with normal means. However, if you put our subdomain here, for instance, this is your Google Tag Manager container downloaded. Like I told you, it's downloaded from our custom subdomain, downloaded with a gibberish.js file instead of GTM.js, and your ID is cropped to also be a little bit masked from the things. So that's our custom loader. So we encourage you to use it at all times. That only benefits you, and there's no drawbacks from it. Now, the cookie keeper is a little bit more complicated. This thing is essentially built to help you extend cookie lifetime on Safari. I don't want to go into too much technical detail, but pretty much even with server-side tracking, even with a custom domain like we did here, your cookies on Safari will actually live for up to 7 days. In order to remedy that without going into CDN and complicated implementations that might not be available to a wider crowd, we've created this cookie keeper. What it does essentially is it externalizes the storage of cookies to our database. What's going to happen on Safari is every time a person loads your Google Tag Manager container, a set of cookies which we've configured here, which are the main platforms. You have Analytics, Google Ads, which is the topic of the webinar. They will be restored from a database, and each time they change a page or navigate the website, the cookies will be stored to that database. Effectively, this means that on Safari, your cookie lifetime at any given moment in time, it will be 7 days. So whenever you're looking at it, it will have 7 more days to live. You look at it tomorrow, another 7 days and everything. So that's Cookie Keeper for you. And yeah, I think I'm done, and I'm ready for live questions if that's okay. I mean, I think we can spend another 15 minutes or something to answer something live if that's needed. So you guys let me know.
I think we have 3 minutes left, so not too much time. I think we answered almost all questions in the chat. So we will create a blog post with a link to the video of this webinar and write there all questions that you asked us and answers for them. And if you will have new questions, you will be able to ask them under this post on our site, and we will be happy to answer them.
And just to build your expectation, this will happen early next week. Yes, we need just some time for this.
Yeah, I just want to add like a small bonus. Well, from me and the team, I think within those materials we're going to distribute, we're going to also eventually send you container templates, web and server, designed for Shopify specifically based, based on working with our data layer. So you can import, export them and test this real quick. And this will be much more accessible. You don't have to jump through all of these hoops. So expect that as well. With this, I'm going to shut down my microphone because I've talked for an hour. So I thank everyone for joining and best of luck in your tracking endeavors.